Well, as promised, we'd like to talk more on Brexit. Now, interesting comments have been circulating on social media. Theresa may exit the British government and her rule before even the Brexit deal works out. So exactly. With these comments, I think it's opportune time for us to discuss more on it. We've invited to our studios an analyst and expert in foreign policy and international relations, George Cooke, who is the Deputy Director of the Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies.
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome to First at 9.
Thank you.
Well, George, I think we've been talking at length about Brexit and its implications, but now with a no deal, with all these developments in the UK, at one time one of the most powerful empires in the world, and now in modern day politics, with all this chaos, what's it for Britain and the region?
So the Brexit vote that took place 2 years ago obviously rattled international relations discourse. We're looking at two key areas. One is sovereignty and the other is regionalism. Britain wanted to come out, or a majority that voted at that point wanted to come out of the European Union, citing a violation of sovereignty. But of course, in the process, they've ended up jeopardizing sovereignty within the United Kingdom, keeping the four parts together. This has become one of the biggest challenges. We saw that in the wake of the Brexit vote. We saw that upon Theresa May's being sworn in as Prime Minister. Although she did say Brexit is Brexit and they would go ahead with it, the very next day she flew to Scotland to reassure Nicola Sturgeon and the 62% of the people of Scotland who voted to remain. That whatever was done would be done in consultation with, in cooperation with the people of Scotland. Northern Ireland is another issue with regard to the border. So we're opening up old issues as well once again here. That's in terms of sovereignty. On the other hand, with regionalism, the European Union was held up as one of the foremost examples of regionalism in terms of integration, where the regions had come together over a long period of time since the end of the Second World War. But this has been rattled. This has been shaken to the very core. And the European Union obviously wants to progress further. This has become a stumbling block.
Now, if you take the incidents that took place yesterday, the drama that unfolded in the British Parliament, British Prime Minister came and put her Brexit plan to vote, lost with a massive majority towards the opposition, which means her own party members voted against her. What does this mean going forward in case she fails tonight? In case that the no confidence motion by the opposition wins ground at the British Parliament? Does this mean that the whole political system in the United Kingdom has gone back to square one and they have to restart the whole entire process? Or what will happen?
They're actually facing a rather huge dilemma at this point, simply because in case she does lose, which is said to be unlikely for various reasons, but of course you never know. This is numbers and it's numbers game. In case she does lose at this point, they have a 2-week period in which to decide on whether they can form a government or not, and thereafter it's going in for a general election. And as she has been saying, as she said just a few minutes ago in the House as well, it's a very, very difficult time, and what she feels is going for an election would divide the country even more rather than uniting the country at this particular point. So she's not exactly in favor of going for a general election, nor is she in favor of a second referendum.
Yeah, but the issue here has been what the Prime Minister proposes. What she says we should not be doing is the exact thing that her party members are going against with, and the accusation that they continuously keep making towards her is that she is not listening to their proposals and they are not getting the best solution to Britain from this particular deal. So how can she change her entire tune?
This is where Jeremy Corbyn has called her government a zombie government at this point, with the way it's going forward. 2 years of negotiations. What has been done within the country in building consensus amongst policymakers, amongst politicians, within the Parliament, within the House of Commons. How much cross-party talks have taken place. These are the massive problems that she's facing today. And it is today when they turn around and say, you have not consulted us, you have not spoken to us. Her own backbenchers are having problems with that. And that's why you saw 118 of her own backbenchers voting down the draft withdrawal plan yesterday.
Right, I think with Brexit and with the tight deadline, at the end of March for Brexit, I'd also like to ask you what you think would be implications be on the region, and also specifically on smaller nations as Sri Lanka. And I'd like you to comment a little on Sri Lanka's balance of powers with China and India, because we've been talking about the Port City project, the reclamation work being complete. That's up next, but let's comment on that too.
So initially talking about what impact this would have on the region, the European Union is very concerned. We've seen their concern throughout. They did not want Britain to vote the way it did in 2016, but it happened. There were several attempts that were made. So many governments called for Britain to remain. Of course, from the day Britain joined, 2 years later, in the 1970s, we saw Britain trying to leave. So this is not something new. And of course, David Cameron promised the referendum. He had to go ahead with it. And the rest is democracy. This is part of how democracy plays out, and what we saw happening. But of course, the other countries, now this is having an impact on other countries simply because there are other parties, minority parties, maybe parties not in government in other European countries, which are also now questioning. If Britain can leave, and if Britain is asking for a better deal, why can't we ask for a better deal? And that's where you're going to see it. We're not going to see a situation in which Britain is going to get the best of the deal, simply because if Britain gets it today, the other countries will want it tomorrow and thereafter. Now, at that point, you don't have a European Union as everyone starts to leave. And this is where we are going to see them wanting to ensure that the situation is tided over. Only yesterday, the German Vice Chancellor attempted to say there are options, we have to look at other alternatives. Other leaders are talking about other alternatives as well, which is no Brexit. And that's what they're trying to call for. A second referendum is something they would welcome. They're even willing to keep Britain in, despite the fact that all these years have gone by and we've wasted time, more or less, in the EU plan.
Now, talking
so very quickly about the China-India matter that we were talking about, we'll have to go into the next story. What do you think is it for Sri Lanka with the power balance and the regional superpowers, at Sri Lanka?
This is where Sri Lanka as a small country is not in a position to take sides. Sri Lanka needs all countries out there, irrespective of the country, irrespective of the region. We have consistently talked about the fact that Sri Lanka is a friend to all and enemy to none. This is where at all times we've got to realize that there are certain power plays within the region, outside the region. We've got to make the most out of it for Sri Lanka. This is where there has to be a pro-Sri Lanka stance adopted at all times, irrespective of the situation, irrespective of the country. We will be mindful of the interests of the country. Whether it's a loan that is taken, whether it is a grant that is received, whether it is a negotiation, it has to be utilized to the best opportunity in favor of the country.
So very quickly, George, you touched on the no Brexit, which means if there could be a second referendum, and this is where most of the parties within the parliament is pushing for. Is that democracy?
That's a very good question. And this is where you begin to question, going back to 2016, where many people who voted came out the next morning and said, we didn't expect the Prime Minister to resign. And you'd think you made your vote, you voted, you made a concerted decision. You did not vote in a very haphazard manner. Now, was enough campaigning done to explain the repercussions of going out or staying in? Now, or was it merely party politics? Was it merely trading accusations? What was going on at the time in the campaign? How much did the British people understand? How many of them went out in their numbers and voted?
Right, I think, George, that's all the time we have. But thank you very much for your time here in our studios, and I'm glad you shared your expertise with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.